Welcome to the Outsmart Overeating podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Hooper, alongside co-host here, Steph Miramontes. And today we are bringing you a guest from Georgia, Beth. Welcome to the show. Looking forward to hearing about your experience in the Unstuffed program. Do you mind to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your dieting background?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Beth. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, and today is my 53rd birthday, which is critical to this information because I guess that means that I've been on the dieting hamster wheel for about 33 years of chasing my tail, of trying to get it right and not being able to do it until just recently.
Yeah, well, we definitely want to understand a little bit more about that. Congratulations on making it to the big 53, but also 33 years of dieting sounds pretty brutal. So let's unpack that a little bit. Why don't you share with us? Sounds like you started dieting in your early 20s then. Was there something at that point in your life that caused you to start dieting? Was it just exposure? Now we're kind of college age, more body conscious or aware. What set the wheels in motion for you to start dieting?
In high school, I didn't diet in high school, but I always was aware that being a 6 foot tall girl in high school, I wasn't the same size as my friends. I didn't wear the same size as my friends. I just took up more space than my friends, and I was always bothered by that. But back then in the 80s, not enough to know what to do about it. I just knew enough that I was really bothered by it. And I always saw myself as being too big or fat when really I was just taller than everyone else. And back then, they also didn't make clothes to fit us tall people. They barely still do. Um, but then in college, I moved to Georgia. I moved from Wisconsin to Georgia. And being my first year here at Georgia in college, I gained a good bit of weight. Then I really did put on actual substantial weight. And I still didn't really know what to do about it. So I just did anything I could think of, which was join any program or do whatever anyone told me to do. And it was successful and I lost weight and it was great, but I couldn't keep it off because I had done stupid things like starving myself or like the stupid soup diet or the cabbage diet or putting lemon in your water and drinking 2 liters of that first thing in the morning and just the stupidest things. And so that just started the beginning of the never ending chasing of the diet that might finally be the one that works forever.
Right. Yeah. Very relatable story. I feel like all of us did the most extreme bullshit that was never going to be sustainable. And we're obviously big believers around here of the way you lose it is the way you have to live it. And our pain is so strong that we just want to get rid of it immediately. We will do the most asinine, ridiculous things just to get out of our discomfort, to get out of that pain without considering maybe the harm or the negative effects of what we're attempting, or that it's not even going to be sustainable. If we can't maintain this 6 months from now, how the hell are we going to maintain it for the rest of our lives, or even 6 weeks? I mean, listen, the average dieter quits after 6 days. So I don't know. Were we planning on doing the cabbage soup diet forever? Because that sounds pretty terrible. Well, Beth, what were some of your obstacles? I mean, it sounds like you're pretty typical in that you lost weight and regained weight and lost weight and regained weight. And one thing that we like to ask around here is, did you know that you were an emotional eater before joining this program? Because the common trend seems to be a lot of that yo-yo dieting behavior is rooted in emotional eating. And so I'd love to get a little bit of your perspective on that.
I did not think I was an emotional eater. I would have told you steadfastly that I was, in fact, not an emotional eater. In fact, if I'm angry or sad or upset, I can't eat. I don't want to eat. When I eat is when I eat something that's off limits or something that's a trigger food, and I'll just go ham. Like I'll just go batshit crazy and eat it and not be able to pull myself away from it until it's completely gone. Like a Costco sized jar of peanut butter. I'll just go shit rolls crazy on it. And so I would say, no, I wasn't an emotional eater. I was it tastes good eater. I want to eat, I want to overeat this because it tastes good. Well, it took me a while in this very program to recognize that that is in fact emotional eating. So that was a hard sell for me, actually, was to recognize that emotional eating isn't necessarily eating because you're sad or stressed out. It's eating because you're lost in the moment and in the cycle.
I feel like identifying that has to be such a huge transformation, just understanding that about ourselves or even admitting it. Do you think that you're resistant to it because it didn't show up in the Hollywood stereotypical way? Or was it more like the label that you didn't want to apply to yourself because it felt kind of, I don't know, uncomfortable?
I think it was more like a clinical symptom checker kind of situation, like we're kind of led to believe that emotional eating is when you're sad or stressed out, you go home and you go to the freezer and you get a carton of ice cream and you sit down in a slump, and that's emotional eating. And that wasn't me. It wasn't. In fact, if I was sad or angry, that's when I didn't want to eat. But what it was for me was, if God forbid, Girl Scout cookies appeared in the house, they spoke to me. I couldn't walk away from them. Like, honest to God, I would go to bed and just lay there, and those bitches were all I could think about were those motherfucking cookies until I couldn't wait to get up the next morning and just eat the shit out of them. So yeah, it's not even that I didn't want to identify it. It's that I didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to solve for a problem that we don't know, number one, that we have, and number two, we don't understand it, right? It's just like trying to, I don't know, hit a target in the dark. It's almost impossible to do that. So I want to hear more about why you decided to join Unstuffed when you did. Was there something happening in your life at that particular time? I always say most clients don't take action until they are in their dirty diaper and are desperate for change. Maybe they stepped on the scale, they have a wedding coming up, right? They see a picture of themselves that they find really triggering, and now suddenly they have all the motivation to take action. Was there anything like that for you, or had you just been kind of following the content for a while and the doors opened and then we closed them after a few days, and so you took advantage of the opportunity?
Yeah, it was kind of a little bit of both. So first of all, I suffer from severe FOMO. And if I hear that there's something out there that might work better than others, I can't stop thinking about it. I seem to be self-diagnosing myself with a little bit of an obsessive compulsive disorder, but, and I had been following the podcast. I don't even know how I stumbled on the podcast, but I started listening to it. I scrolled all the way down from podcast number one and just started working my way all the way up to the top. And the more I heard, the more you were like, it was like you were having a conversation with me. And like, I was like, Jesus, this is like, did she get in my head? Has she been talking to me and I didn't even know it? And then, I think I signed up for something for email notifications or something like that. And then that's when I found out about it. But I think what it was that made me even hone in on your podcast is, a couple of years ago, several years ago, perimenopause knocked at my door, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And then post-menopause came and shit changed overnight. And I like to go to the science and find out, like, am I gaining weight because of menopause, and are all these things happening because of hormones? And when the science started saying no, that you don't gain weight because of menopause, that I was like, fuck you all, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But it's not. I had to realize that I was doing it to my own self. It wasn't necessarily the hormones. The hormones made it harder to address, yes, but ultimately it was on me. So it was just kind of like this perfect storm of stumbling on your podcast and you speaking to me personally, it felt like, and then finding out that this program was available, and then menopause just like being the final straw that just made the whole precarious house of cards come tumbling down until here I was at your doorstep.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like thank you for touching on the fact that hormones definitely make things more difficult, more challenging, but we are always looking for a solution outside of ourselves, as if we are powerless and there's some kind of magical tool in the toolbox that we don't know that exists, or if we find the perfect ratio of fats, carbs, and protein, or the right, the suggestions from our brain are pretty constant, looking for solutions. So relatable. Thank you, Beth. I'm going to bring Steph into the conversation here because you two have also been working together very closely. And Steph, you've had a front row seat at Beth's transformation as well. And Beth, I've heard since you two have started working together, just for some context for our listeners, Beth went through the Unstuffed program and has since spent a little bit of time working with Steph one-on-one as well. And so Steph, I'd just love to get your perspective, your view on your relationship with Beth and the way that she has continued to evolve through this process.
It's been really fun. And one thing that I'll touch on that y'all were talking about was the emotional eaters side of things. And I think a lot of people don't identify as emotional eaters. I certainly didn't. And I think the biggest problem or the biggest barrier to understanding that you're an emotional eater is the fact that we are not really taught more than mad, sad, happy, stressed as emotions. And we don't consider happy eating emotional eating because that's not negative. There's not negative connotations. It's not as heavy. And so then we just have like mad and sad and stressed. And there are so many other emotions. And I remember when you and I first started working together one-on-one, Beth, we talked a lot about things like procrastinating and distraction eating and things like that, as if, and even desire, like you described. Desire is emotion, my friends. Like desire is a feeling. Even an over desire is what you were experiencing when you're laying in bed, like gritting your teeth thinking, can I get up and have Girl Scout cookies at midnight? That's over desire. And a lot of that comes from that 30 years of dieting past, that restriction mindset. And even if you're not restricting at the time, you just literally had a sleeve of Thin Mints, it doesn't matter because there's a place in your brain that says, eventually, though, we're never going to have these again. Like, eventually, we're going to get our shit together and no more Girl Scout cookies for you. And that creates over desire. So it's just really interesting when we start breaking some of these pieces down, the light bulbs start going off and things start changing. And as it relates to your question, Leslie, of just the transition through the program and into one-on-one, what I really loved about coaching Beth through the Unstuffed program is how relatable her situation was with what I have been through, what you have been through, because you didn't just do a bunch of fad diets. You did some of that shit too. We all did, like cabbage soup sisters over here. But, and the answer to your question, Leslie, is absolutely. If we could, we would do, the thought is if you could lose all the weight, nothing would matter. You would do cabbage soup the rest of your life. Of course, that's a fantasy. It's bullshit. But I think that is like the underlying belief. It's like, I don't care what tomorrow brings. I just need to know today that I'm going to be thin. But the calorie counting and the macro counting and the fitness side of things, so much of what Unstuffed does is unlearn as people learn. We have to unteach and remove and shovel out all the shit from the brain that stops us from being successful. And I know in the Unstuffed program, Beth, from my perspective, you had a lot of calorie counting, macro counting, diet brain you needed a little lobotomy there before we could start looking at these habits as a sustainable and viable solution for success. But what do you think?
Oh God. Yeah. It seemed like every time we talked one-on-one, you would, and it still happens. You ask a super innocuous question, it's like super general, and somehow it unlocks this waterfall aha moment where I answer it, and you're like, well, stop right there. What did you mean by that? And I'm like, shit. I don't even know what the hell I meant by that. Like, it became so ingrained in my narrative that I didn't even know it was coming out of my mouth, and I didn't even know it was um predisposing me to certain behaviors. Like every single conversation with you was like this huge unlocked aha moment that it just hit differently than it did in the group sessions. And I think because in the group sessions, I'm listening to so many other people's aha moments that I'm like, oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, me too. That I kind of I needed more. I personally needed more of a drill down with you. Um, and that was just it seems like it never stops. It seems like every time we talk, there's something new that's getting unlocked.
I think that that is both the benefit and the difficulty of group settings. There are pros and cons to both, depending on who you are and what your personality type is and how you like to work and how you like to learn. But there is so much community and what's the right word for this? Just connection with people that are going through what you're going through. Like you said, me too. Same. Girl, get it. Like, I know, been there, doing that, done that, all the things, right? It's so relatable. And we do coach. It's very high touch in the group, right? You raise your hand, you get coached. Every
Mhm.
single person that raises their hand gets coached, period. And so we do have that opportunity to have high touch, but I think that it's really easy not to raise your hand when
Mhm.
you're over there going, yeah, me too, same, me too, same. I don't want to bring my problem. My problem's the same as their problem, and so when you have a weekly appointment, I'm calling you and I'm not going to forget. I'm going to call you and we're going to have a conversation, and it allows us to kind of just hear it in a different setting. You're not paying attention to what everyone else is doing. So I really do love both. And I don't think that, well, maybe you would have, but I think starting with the group and moving into one-on-one tends to be a really good strategy for a lot of folks because you do all the unlearning in the group. You do the basic learning of the habits, you get your basic questions answered, and then it's like, now let's go deep. Let's really dig into the cobwebs here and figure this out together.
Yeah, I would say 100% that is a 100% accurate assessment. If I hadn't done the group learning first and gone through the basic steps and kind of gotten at least up to my kneecaps in the cold water, I don't think it would have been like the dots wouldn't have connected as well.
Yeah, I definitely think there's advantages to both, right? Obviously. And that's why I almost kind of like a hybrid model for some of our clients where they're doing the group every other week and they're doing one-on-ones every other week. I mean, that is something that I have occasionally offered certain clients, just knowing where they're at. But bottom line is everybody needs to be coached individually, not in a cookie cutter way or format in order to be successful in a process like this. And Beth, you've been dieting for 33 years, lady. That's a long ass time. And of course, you have deeply entrenched subconscious beliefs, food rules, ideas about what's right, what's wrong that you are living by. And that does take time to unravel. Whereas a client who maybe has only been dieting for 5 to 10 years, counting macros, whatever, doesn't have as much and might have more success. But I say it doesn't have as much, I just mean as much history or deeply ingrained habits. It's maybe a little easier for them to unravel some of that. Again, it's very case by case, which is why we do give our group coaching clients the option to upgrade to one-on-one if and when we feel like maybe they would thrive better in that environment. But also, I mean, not to turn this into like the one-on-one versus group coaching show or episode, but I do think, Steph, to your point, how does somebody learn? And do they need that degree of hand holding, or their schedule's just not as flexible so they can't make the coaching calls as consistently as they would benefit from? So all of those things kind of have to go into consideration. And plenty of our group coaching clients do extremely well in the group. They don't need all of that because we do make sure everybody gets coached every single week. So, all right, enough on that. Let's move on. Beth, I want to hear about your actual participation in the program. What were some of your biggest challenges? We talked about the group. It's easier to kind of fade into the background or not really participate or not show up to all of the calls when you're in a group. That's very difficult to do in a one-on-one. So what were some of your challenges? Maybe not so much with the format of the program, but just behaviorally, or what did you have a hard time implementing or finding your groove or consistency with?
Doing the work. I mean, I hate to admit it, but sometimes I'm pretty lazy at heart. Like, I didn't want to show up. I didn't want to do the work. I didn't want to do the workbooks, or I just didn't want to do the work. I just wanted to consume the information and make it magically do its thing.
Give me all the information, but none of the integration. And then we wonder why we are upset and frustrated. But frankly, this is a good opportunity to highlight how people like the idea of change, but don't always want to do the actual work. And so this is why sometimes people do kind of fade into the background because they're like, oh, I didn't know I was actually going to have to do something. We pay money. We just kind of expect the transformation to magically happen. It's like, no, you're getting access to our playbook, our coaching, our brains, our process, but you still have to follow the roadmap that's been created for you. So Steph, having worked with Beth, what do you feel you observed as maybe some of your bigger obstacles, Beth, and Steph as her mentor?
I just think that a lot of the obstacles are what many people experience with the group stuff, is finding the value in doing the worksheets, doing the journaling, doing the tracking, those kinds of things, and showing up. It's so easy for your calendar to go off and say, hey, you have a coaching call, and be like, I'll listen to the replay. And for some people that is perfect, and for others it's not. But with Beth, what we ended up doing after having a few conversations is finding out ways to track that did work for her brain, that did work for the way that she was willing to put in the practice and then see success and feel that success and be driven to continue. So we did some different challenges and we looked outside the box, which is something that, it's something that we do also inside of the group program. If it comes up in that way, we say, like, how can we start seeing some success? But when it's one-on-one and you're talking every week, it's a little bit easier to go outside the box and customize versus everybody kind of being on the same flow of things. And that's the way it goes. But I think that was one of the biggest challenges. One of the other biggest challenges was just believing that this was going to work. Once you really get the ball rolling, once you really invest and say, I'm in it to win it, we're going to do this. Because again, that unlearning, that calorie counting, macro counting diet brain is so loud, so obnoxious. And it's like, this is the only way I've ever lost weight. This is the only way I've ever done it. And it's like, cool. It's also the only reason why you are so obsessed with food. Can we try another way? And that trust and that belief takes time to earn. It takes time to cultivate. And then you start getting the results, you start getting some reassurance, you start getting some confidence, and that builds momentum. So, and the other thing that I think is a little bit of a challenge that not all of our clients experience, something that's a bit unique to Beth, is the fact that not only is she a busy professional, but she is also someone who teaches exercise classes, quite a few of them. So she's training a lot, she's exercising a lot, she's in the gym culture a lot. And that's both an emotional barrier to overcome and a nutritional barrier to overcome. And I'm really sorry about that, Train.
We didn't hear it, so it's all good. One thing that I just want to highlight here, because I think it's something that does make this process in our program unique and different, is when I notice a client being resistant to the journaling, then we start changing the conversation to, what are you resistant to? right? Getting to the bottom of what's on the other side, or maybe even beneath it. Is it, like you said, Steph, a lack of belief? Is it fear of failure because we failed so many times? And so we're just kind of failing on purpose ahead of time so we don't have to endure the disappointment later. Is it the perfectionism, right? Like if I'm not going to do all of it, then I'm not going to do any of it type of thing. And I think that's where we help break down barriers and walls with our clients, is by helping them understand, firstly, why they're resistant to it. They don't see the value of it yet because they haven't experienced the outcome, the result. But I'm with you, you have to do something different if you want a different result, right? And so just helping you get to the place where there is a belief, first and foremost, of why this isn't something that we need to fear, why we don't need to be resistant to it. It creates an opportunity to open the door for other mental shifts and habits to become reinforced over time. But if you have that belief that this isn't going to work, well, that's the first thing we got to get coached on, because you're not going to be willing to do anything if that's the barrier, right? And that's frankly where a lot of people are. That's why they give up and quit. So, Beth, did you have thoughts of giving up and quitting, considering your mental framework early on in this process?
All the time. And that was my barriers. I didn't believe it would work. I could not fathom, I could not believe that it was possible to shut down the food noise and be free from dieting and lose weight and maintain a healthy weight without counting calories. Like I was constant, like running the numbers. That's what I'm always doing, running the numbers real quick. Breakfast, I would say this is approximately 450 calories. Like the thought of not running the numbers, silencing the numbers was, it was terrifying. Like that to me was a recipe for disaster. And I felt like, and this wasn't a conscious thought, but as I peel back the layers, I think that subconsciously I thought all the journaling in the world is not going to change how the numbers work. And so I didn't believe that it would be helpful. And I'm pleased to report that I was so wrong.
Well, I do think that it's true. All the journaling in the world is not going to change the numbers, because the numbers are factual. That's science. But what needs to change isn't the numbers. It's your brain. It's the way you're thinking about the numbers, or that we are even obsessed or concerned with the numbers in the first place. That's a barrier between you and getting connected to your body, right? Because we're always filtering it through the lens of hitting the numbers. And that can bring up emotions, because if I'm looking at a plate of food and I'm like, okay, I know mentally I'm only supposed to be eating X amount of calories a day to lose weight, and this is like 800 calories, and it's like, oh shit, it's hard to get to a place where we can drop into our body and have the experience of assessing our hunger and fullness, because you're eating from your mind. And over time, as you've learned, Beth, because I know you've lost quite a bit of weight, and throughout this process, and most recently, once things have obviously started to click, is because you've been able to turn down that noise and that fear and connect more with your physical cues. And so I'm curious, personally, are you just not hearing the same number crunching going on before you take your first bite at your meals? Or is it still there and you're just able to turn the volume down a bit more?
Yes, it is still there. I long for the day that soundtrack will finally fray to pieces and get eaten up by the tape recorder. But it is still there, but I am able to turn the volume down. Like I'll start to, like a knee-jerk reaction, run the numbers, and then I just tell myself, I have a lot of self-talk going on in my head now. Instead of constant food chatter, it's more like self-talk, like let it go, like don't worry about the numbers, just eat the meal and listen to how you feel about it. Are you getting full? Is it tapping on your belly? Is it starting to tell you maybe it's time to tap out? Then tap out and don't worry about the numbers. And if the numbers are right, it'll reveal itself by the time it's time for your next meal, if you're hungry or not. That was a game changer. That was like, it also made me mad when I finally started to connect the dots, that it had taken me this long to connect the dots on something so fucking simple. What? Listen for hunger? That's what it takes? The fuck is that? Something that works.
Yeah, I know. It is kind of a wild experience when you realize that I have been slaving away and wasting so much of my life, my time, my energy, and calculating macros and chasing a certain amount of liters of water. And, I'm not saying that these are like bad things. I'm just saying they take up a lot of time and energy. And if that's where you want to invest your time and energy, knock your socks off. But understand, it is not a requirement for successful weight loss. You can actually have both. You can lose weight by respecting those hunger and fullness cues all the way to your goal, and also live like a fulfilling life in the process, as opposed to being chained to MyFitnessPal app and your food scale at every meal. And so I remember feeling really frustrated by that as well. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's really just this simple. Meanwhile, we're like researching gut health and intermittent fasting and all the things. And I don't want to minimize the struggle, because it is a struggle, but it's not because weight loss is particularly, the process of losing weight is particularly complex. It's just our minds getting in our own way and overcomplicating it, and those rules, and that make it difficult. Steph, what do you think?
1,000%. It's so funny when people get so frustrated, and I count myself among these people, when it's just like, oh, hungry, oh, full, enough, food, satisfied. What the hell? It didn't have to be a part-time job. What are you talking about? My body already knew how to do this. Why didn't anybody tell me when I was 8 and I started dieting then? What the fuck? So it's very frustrating to go straight into overthinking every bite you take, whether it's diet rules or number crunching or a combination of the two, when you have a built-in system. We're just not taught to listen to it. And then you lack so much trust in your own body because you've been taught that something is wrong with it, that it doesn't do its job. And that just sucks. So yeah, absolutely. I am with it. And I have said many a time, I am not mad that I know about calories. I am not mad that I know about a macro. I am glad that I understand fiber and nutrition and things like that. Like, I'm not mad at the knowledge and understanding that I have about health and well-being and what I should prioritize and things like that. I think that those things can be valuable and helpful. I just don't want to spend every minute of my life thinking about it and watching the clock to see when I get my next meal and ignoring my body completely and making it irrelevant of, oh, you're too full? Too bad, I still have food left. Haha. Oh, you're super hungry and you can't sleep at night. Oh, well, ate all your calories today, bitch. Too bad for you. Guess you don't get sleep either. You can just starve and be awake. Like, I don't want to live that life. So and I know those are kind of extreme descriptions, but they're also not that uncommon.
No, especially if
a
we're
lot.
talking about our restrictor clients who are extreme dieters, right? That tends to be our macro counting clients. Lean more. I mean, look, that is a lot of work and takes a lot of energy to track your macros and do all of those number crunching and weighing your food and doing your Sunday meal prep. I mean, all that. That is an extreme way to eat. It is a complex way to interact with food. It's not natural, right? What is natural is hunger and fullness and learning how to reconnect to that and stop eating from the mind. But I guess, Beth, one thing that I want to know is, when do you feel like maybe the habits, this process started to really click for you? You mentioned in the group being, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, kind of flirting with the program, but not really going all in because of your belief that this probably really wasn't going to work. Nothing had worked. Why would this be any different, right? And that's a common narrative. But when do you think you started to become a believer and things started to click a bit more and you started to develop more confidence in yourself in this process?
When I would hear other friends and colleagues talk about a diet that they're doing or a diet that they're going to implement or share with other people, and they would talk about 1,200 calories or weighing and measuring everything and, like doing X number of calories for 6 to 8 weeks. When I would start to hear people talk about that, I would start to get kind of, I don't want to say panicky, but like I'd start to get these really dark feelings like I, I, I don't ever want to go back there ever again. I don't want to be so tied to the macros and the calories and the counting. And when I would hear people talking about this, I was like, I would want to tell them like there's a better way and I'm finally discovering it. And you don't have to live like this um, and do all the restricting and the counting. And I think that that's when it started to click, was probably like a few months in when I started to recognize how freeing, like you don't even recognize it at first, how freeing it is to be free from the numbers and how freeing it is to, if you if you go to the office and they have a bowl of candy, you can have the damn candy. Like you're not going to die. You're not going to gain 10 pounds in a day. Just have the candy. Throw it, put it on your plate and make it part of your lunch. Or maybe the candy is your lunch. I've done that. I've gone to the office and they have a candy bowl and that was my lunch. And I was fucking thrilled about it. And I felt so good to be able to go home that night. I wasn't hungry. And then I had dinner like a normal person. It was, I think that's when it all came together for me, was when people would be talking about counting their stupid goddamn 1,200 calories. And I was over here having candy for lunch and I was okay with it. And I still was dropping pounds.
Yeah. It does take a while to believe that that is possible when you have grown up through diet culture, believing that sugar is the devil and weight loss is basically impossible if you are consuming it with any degree of consistency. And so the best way to lose weight, the fastest way to lose weight is by eating whole foods. And this girl knows all about gaining weight eating whole foods. That was my story. I was checking all the whole food boxes early on, and I was still overeating. I was still gaining weight. So it wasn't just that simple. I am curious about you talk about sugar or candy or whatever, and that would typically in the program be considered a quote unquote trigger food, a food that people generally associate with weight gain, a food that they fear, that we avoid when we're trying to lose weight. Was that a scary concept for you in the beginning of the process? Were you skeptical that that was going to actually help you lose weight instead of, because obviously it's contradictory to everything we've learned. So it feels maybe at first it goes one of two ways for people. Either they love it because finally they have permission and they kind of go all in. And then there's other clients, our restrictors generally, who tend to be a little bit more healthifying their trigger foods, or having like the protein bars, or just putting the one little square of chocolate on their plate. So, not really going all in, I guess. Which camp did you fall into, Beth?
I was a roller coaster. I guess you could classify me as a scatter chart because initially I was like, oh no, oh, here comes my Wisconsin accent. Oh God, I'm not doing that. No. Um, and then I went ahead and allowed myself the little square of candy or the little teaspoon or one tablespoon, which was, approximately 75 calories of peanut butter. And but then I went all in and then I went overboard and I kind of went in the wrong direction. But then again, maybe I didn't, because now I think maybe I almost needed to go way over onto the other side to recognize that the scarcity that I can have this stuff. And then like the newness of it started to wear off. So my whole life I classify myself as allergic to chocolate because it's a significant migraine trigger for me. It causes migraines for me that are like strokes. Half my body goes numb. I develop aphasia. I can't see. It's been a big trigger for me. But when I crossed over into postmenopause without estrogen, chocolate isn't one of the triggers anymore. So I was able to finally enjoy chocolate again. And now I can. And so it took me a little bit to, like, I almost had to have so much chocolate that the newness of it wore off. And now when I'm in front of it, I could take it or leave it. It's not that big of a deal. I could walk away from it very easily. And so and now I just answered that question as if I'm a scatter chart, but to answer your question, I experienced all of those things. I was skeptical, I was afraid, I went overboard, and then I kind of swung back into naturally feeling okay with it.
Yeah, and that is the journey for many. I don't think that going overboard, quote unquote, was problematic for you. It sounds like it's what you probably needed. It was a part of your healing process to get into this equilibrium, right? To find your balance and adopt that that abundance mindset where we're not thinking about it, we're not feeling left out or like we're missing out on it. So it is just a part of the process for some, where the pendulum does kind of swing rapidly, fast and hard, but then you also get over it pretty quickly when you go all in like that quickly, as opposed to just putting your toe in the water with the protein bars or the couple of pieces of chocolate or a handful of those dirty, naughty grapes with sugar in them. I'm like, really? We're not allowed to eat grapes anymore? Hey, I definitely avoided grapes and bananas when I read that they were problematic. So I tried to minimize them. Beth, I don't want to keep you too much longer. This is your birthday. I know you have better things to do than hang out with Steph and I today, but I would like to get your perspective on, it is your birthday. How is this birthday going to be different as it relates to your relationship with food and eating than it would maybe previous birthdays?
That's an interesting question. It feels like a rebirth almost. Because I'm gonna have my cake and I'm gonna eat that motherfucker too. And I'm gonna go out to dinner with friends and family and I'm gonna enjoy the shit out of it. And I'm gonna go to bed tonight feeling not ashamed. I'm not going to go to dinner and scan the menu for the lowest possible calorie options. I'm going to get what I want, eat to the point of not being uncomfortable, take home the rest for maybe breakfast or lunch the next day, and I'm going to go to bed feeling happy and fulfilled instead of feeling guilty and ashamed. And that feels like the best birthday present ever.
Awesome. I'm so happy for you. I also can remember giving myself permission to eat whatever I wanted as some kind of free for all day, and then just feeling miserable about it, not being able to really enjoy the cake either because I was eating too much and I was feeling guilty the entire time, or I was just physically miserable because I had eaten myself into a sugar coma, and that was also really unpleasant. And so being able to have birthday cake and enjoy it without all of the food noise, without that guilt, without the shame, without the false promise that tomorrow I'm going to work it off with the extra exercise and slash my calories and only eat protein and vegetables, right? All of that nonsense just dissipates. And now you just get to enjoy your birthday in the way that it was supposed to be intended, without all that drama. So obviously your relationship with food sounds quite different today. And I love that you said that it's a rebirth, because it really does feel that way when you go through this process. Steph, any other questions or thoughts that you want to add here? I might ask you, Beth, one or two more questions before we wrap up, but I want to make sure, Steph, that I give you an opportunity to get in here. That's what she said.
So
Get
good.
in. What I love about your description of your birthday plans is it's representative of what we've been working on as it relates to restaurant dining, family meals, meals out, and those kinds of experiences. They're so different than they were several months ago. You often go out to dinner. You are not someone who eats every meal at home, and you've gone from someone who feels like this is special, this is scarce, this is, I don't necessarily have as much control, to are you kidding me? I left half my dessert. I have never done that in my life. Like, this was creme brulee and I didn't eat it all. Who even am I? It just blows your mind. And so as you start talking about your birthday dinner and things, I'm like, you've got this. This is who you are now. You've done it so many times. And yeah, sometimes there are going to be some overeats in everybody's life. That's totally normal, but it's never going to feel the way that it used to because you just don't have that in you anymore. You've changed. One thing that comes up for me is you have been a long-term dieter. I've been a long-time dieter. I'm a parent, you're a parent. And just thinking about how my dieting passed, I raised my kids and, saw certain things and things like that. And if we have young parents listening on the podcast and things like that who are going through some of their own dieting struggles, do you have any advice or words of wisdom for them, things to keep in mind as they're trying to figure this out so that, because I know a lot of moms worry like you and I did, like, okay, are my kids going to struggle the same way that I've struggled? Am I doing this right? How does that go?
Wow. I don't even know how to answer that. Gosh, I would say my advice would be to quit hiding from yourself. Um, especially like how our kids are watching us and we say and do things in front of or to our kids that we think is innocuous, and it's just not. And we're doing it, and we're not even saying or doing it to our kids, but we're doing it to ourselves, but they're internalizing it. So stop hiding from yourself and take a hard look at what's really happening and what you need to do. I mean, I feel like because I am a little cold and dead inside, that I feel like I'm not doing an adequate job of really conveying how so incredibly freeing this experience has been, how I've gone from laying in bed and not crying, but just feeling so dark and depressed and ashamed from what I have just eaten or what I had just eaten throughout the day, or the clothes that I didn't fit into today that I fit into last month. I've gone from being in that really dark, isolated place to now I lay down at night, and the only reason I don't sleep is because of menopause, because I just stare at the ceiling and think of literally nothing. That is, I mean, I cannot convey, there are not words in the English language to convey how incredible it feels to leave that dark place. And so my advice to young parents, everybody, stop hiding from yourself.
I think it's great advice and I really appreciate it. I know you and I have had some conversations around those kinds of things. And, none of us have a time machine. We can't go back and just be like, I wish I did it different. But what we can do is do our own work and our own healing and continue to be good examples for ourselves and for the people around us. And I think they see it. I think they see our growth, they see our change, and it's inspiring and it's helpful. So I just really appreciate you sharing that advice. I think it's important for people because we do have quite a few folks who come in just kind of fresh out of college and things like that. And then we have the people who are kind of like you and I who have raised their kids and they're grown and things like that. And then a few in between. But I just think that that message is so, so important for both the people who are just getting their lives started and people who are where we are. I always tell people, there's no sense in thinking like, I wish I would have done it different, or now I feel terrible or whatever. It's like, heal your stuff. Heal your stuff. That is the most loving, kind, amazing thing you can do for future generations and for the people around you that you love, not necessarily just your kids, but society as a whole. And I think you're doing a great job of contributing to that. So I appreciate your wisdom there.
Yeah, everybody benefits from a healthy, happier version of Beth. And I also know how defeated you feel when you are trying so hard. There is nothing that I wanted more, nothing that I tried harder at for longer than weight loss. And it just felt I just felt broken. Like, what is wrong with me? Something as simple as eating less food has this much kind of power and control over me. And I think it really is about reclaiming that power and control. And that's a relationship with ourselves. It has nothing to do with food. And so I appreciate you bringing up the angle with modeling for your kids and your loved ones. I do think that teaching our kids healthy habits early on in life is one of the best gifts that you can do to set them up for long-term success. I think, frankly, that's why going back to some of my old childhood habits was helpful in a way that maybe you struggled a bit longer, Steph and Beth, because you all didn't have that modeling when you were young and impressionable. And so I was able to kind of spring back into some of those old things because I had a memory of it. A lot of our clients don't. So going back to the earlier point of, it might take some of you longer if you have no idea what that looks like or what that feels like. Beth, I want to ask you, do you have any fear of weight regain now? I know that's something that we always are on edge about when we lose weight is, are the wheels going to fall off now? Like I'm getting to a place where maybe I haven't been in a really long time. I actually had this conversation with a client yesterday and she goes, every time I get to 190, like I start self-sabotaging. I can't get past it. And I'm like, well, we need to change your story about what 190 means to you, sis, because it's all about drama and fear and the wheels falling off. And so now it can be a different meaning. And let's start rewriting that story of what 190 means. Maybe we can actually throw the number 190 out the window altogether and not give it any attention or value or whatever. But I'm just wondering, in your case, Beth, is there any of that fear, or does this time just feel so different? You feel so different, like you've become a different person, that there's no way you could go back to that version of yourself. You've seen too much.
Yeah, that's a really cool question because I've never even considered it, if that even answers your question. I mean, I think I used to consider it. I used to be like, well, this will work until it doesn't, until it stops working, you know, like all the other diets. But at this point now, it's not even something that I think about, like if I'm going to go back or gain the weight back, because I finally am comfortable with the realization that, first of all, weight gain, until you fix what's happening, it's a cycle of life. And all it is, you know, a lot of programs will tell you it's just feedback. And I would be like, yeah, that's cute, but it really is. And I truly finally believe that it is just feedback. And so, and I actually did, like when I first started the program, I lost a good bit of weight. And then I gained a good bit of weight, and that really flipped me out and made me really angry. And now I'm losing it again. And so will I gain, you know, am I worried about gaining weight again? Not really, because I know that if I do, it's just feedback. And I know that it means that I need to get back to basics or try to figure out where is it falling apart? What have I stopped doing, or what am I doing different? Or do have a little self-talk with my, you know, have a little chat with my own self. So I can't believe I'm even saying these words, that I'm not worried about gaining weight, because I know exactly what works and what to do. And it's just, I know how to live. I just know how to live now. Wow,
Yeah.
that's really weird to even say.
No, I love that. It's really on brand for it being your rebirth day. So that's really special. And I appreciate you sharing that. I feel like if regain is happening after you move through this process, as it does for some people, we are emotional beings. That's where I'm going immediately, is like, okay, what is going on in my life where I am now using food to get, you know, as support in some capacity or some way, as a distraction, as a way to self-soothe. Like that's where my brain is going now. Before, it would have been back to the slashing the calories and upping the cardio. And I'm just like, no, it's not external anymore. It's not about the food. It's not about the exercise. It's about my thoughts, my emotions. Am I taking care of myself? What do I need? Because that's what's missing in those moments. And I've been there. I mean, the weight gain doesn't look anything like it used to, but it's certainly happened time to time. And I'm fine with that, because like you said, we have the tools. We know what we need. It's just sometimes plugging back in and being like, okay, we haven't been taking very good care of ourselves lately. So final question. We are opening the doors, Beth, to Unstuffed on Monday, April 22nd. 4 days, people have an opportunity to join us for the next 26 weeks. And I'm wondering what advice you would give yourself on day one that you needed to hear, or perhaps even these new individuals who might be on the fence about joining the program and they are skeptical, as you were, as everybody is, of course, because we've all been ripped off and burned by the diet industry so many times, it's hard to trust anybody. But what words did you need to hear, or what words do you think they may need to hear to feel encouraged, to feel like this could actually work? Because we've lost our hope at that stage.
You're worth it. I would say the biggest hurdle for me when I first joined was, do I want to spend the money? And that's a reality of all of us. But the fact was I had already spent the money over and over and over, and I was still chasing my goddamn tail. So do you want to spend the money? Listen, Linda's, you've already spent the money. So make it your final spend and you're worth it.
I love it. Listen, Linda's, absolutely. Beth, the average American dieter will spend $128,000 on weight loss in their lifetime. We're not nearly as expensive as that, that's for sure. But I do think that at this point in time, there is definitely the landscape is changing, right? Ozempic is on the market. People are spending big money on that. And I feel like Steph and I recently put a video on YouTube about this, but I absolutely feel like this program complements that very well, because it does connect you to your hunger and fullness cues, which is what you're learning to navigate with Ozempic. And then if and when you get off of it, you haven't lost everything that you have essentially, or, you're not regaining the things that you have lost. So, I don't know why I just brought up that weird sidebar, but it was just on my mind, so I thought I'd throw it out there. Welcome to my brain, y'all.
Yeah, but I agree with you. It does go hand in hand. Like it really does.
Yeah, and I know that that's a fear, and it's probably on my mind because I went through and responded to like 20 comments last night, and so a lot of them were talking about the fear of kind of regain, and that might even be what prompted my question for you is, yeah, that is always the fear on the other side, but what can we do to minimize or reduce that fear and set you up for long-term success, whether Ozempic or not? Doesn't matter. You're still the same person. You still have the same thoughts. But I think learning to eat from your hunger and fullness cues is a total game changer. Regardless of what side you are on as it relates to those type of drugs or not. So, Steph, final thought. I'll let you have the final word here.
I just want to say how proud I am of Beth and the work that you have done. I think that you've had an incredible transformation. Your mindset shift has been so fun to witness and so fun to be a part of, because you're someone who the light bulbs go off and you can feel it and you can see it happening. Even though you and I just talk on the phone, not necessarily face to face, I can still just experience that alongside you. And I just really appreciate how invested you are in yourself, in the process, and it shows. So I just thank you so much for coming and talking to us and for doing the work on you and being willing to share that with other people. I think that's great.
Thank you.
Beth, your story is so relatable, and you have come full circle. This all started by you listening to my old outdated podcast, and here you are, a guest on the show. So we thank you so much for taking the time to be here, for giving other listeners some hope, because we are beat down and they are desperate by the time they start hearing this message and it resonating. So your story is an important one, and you're just such a delight to be around, honestly. So thank you for trusting me, believing in the program, and big thanks to our listeners. Hey, if y'all are interested, don't forget to join the interest list in the show notes. Zero obligation. You're not required to join, but at least you will get access to early action bonuses and other freebies that other people do not. So once again, everyone have a great week, and we will catch you next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.